Uganda's Chief of Defense Forces, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, suggested that Uganda could enter the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran in support of Israel. His remarks come amid raging regional tensions following recent US and Israeli strikes on Iran and subsequent retaliatory attacks. General Muhoozi, who is also the son of Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, said on X, and I quote, "We want the war in West Asia to end now. The world is tired of it. But any talk of destroying or defeating Israel will bring us into the war on the side of Israel." Kainerugaba has also drawn in attention in recent weeks for announcing plans to erect a statue honoring Yonatan Netanyahu, the brother of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Yonatan was killed while leading Israeli commandos during the 1976 hostage rescue in Uganda. The West Asia conflict has intensified since late February, with continued exchanges of drone and missile strikes involving Israel, US and Iran, as well as impacts across neighboring countries. Despite South Africa accusing Israel of genocide in a landmark case with the International Court of Justice, many African countries have chosen to remain neutral, with some deepening military and economic ties with Israel. Israel has been able to maintain strong ties through agreements with multiple other East African nations, including Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. For more on this, our correspondent Luisa Ulani has sent us this report from Lagos.
As countries take opposing views on Iran war, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, the Ugandan military chief, said his country will fight on the side of Israel if the battle overwhelms Israel. He's known for controversial tweets on X, but analysts view this Israeli tweet as the country's position, as the general has long shown strong support for Israel. For now, Uganda is not directly involved, but this clear warning from one of Africa's most influential military figures adds a surprising new voice to the escalating conflict.
I can't even pronounce the name of this so-called chief of Ugandan Defense Forces, because the name is worthless like the person himself who bears the name. Despite high poverty rate, high malnutrition rate, high child mortality rate, high illiteracy rate, and low life expectancy Uganda has been dealing with, this chief or clown finds nothing important to do for his fellow Ugandans but to go defend Israel in an illegal war. This worthless chief of Ugandan Defense Forces is the son of the worthless president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni. It's amazing, isn't it? This is what you get when you let foreigners choose leaders for you. For decades, black Africans have been unable to take their destiny into their own hand or to rise up, but they have simply been watching passively European imperialists choose or impose puppets and worthless leaders on them. Any black African, who sees nothing wrong with the statement of this so-called chief of Ugandan Defense Forces, is either mentally ill or is worthless for Africa. Whenever I say that African so-called leaders are not leaders, I do mean it literally. African so-called leaders and their leadership have brought so much destructions, misery, pain, and sufferings on their own people that Africa itself has become the laughingstock of the world. For this, any intelligent black person should harbor disdain and animosity towards these leaders. The African so-called leaders are not just thugs and tools for the colonial imperialists, but they are also a bunch of soulless, brainless, shameless individuals. I will not hesitate to believe anyone who says that the grandparents of African so-called leaders were also traitors who collaborated with Europeans and Arabs in the slave trade. How long will it take before black Africans rise up and bring down their so-called leaders who have been oppressing, starving, and dehumanizing them on the behalf of Europeans and other foreigners? While oppressed people in other corners of the earth are viciously fighting against their oppressors, black Africans are busy surrendering to their oppressors. Can these Africans, who love bragging about being college-educated or being successful, tell me right now what impacts their education or success has had on the daily lives of black Africans and on Africa itself? I'm waiting. Any black African, who is not ashamed of hearing the absurdity of this worthless chief of Ugandan Defense Forces, is a piece of human garbage and is useless to the black race. It is beyond imagination that many black Africans still admire and respect their worthless leaders who are nothing but puppets and family dictatorships the colonial imperialists have imposed on Africans. Too many black Africans have the weird mentality of taking advantage of the misery and sufferings of their own kinds. They don't only enjoy seeing their own kind suffering, but they also think it is normal and smart to take advantage of the misery and sufferings of their own people. No, there is nothing normal and smart about profiting from the misery and suffering of your own people. This kind of mentality and behavior are backward and satanic. I've seen with my own eyes how the family of the worthless African leaders and their collaborators live lavishly while the majority, nearly 100%, of their fellow black Africans or citizens live in extreme poverty and misery. This alone is another reason why I will believe anyone who accuses the forefathers of the worthless African leaders of collaborating with the Europeans and Arabs in the slave trade. The worthless African so-called leaders have been letting foreigners come into their countries to loot or appropriate Africa's natural resources, to abuse Africans, and to violate African women and children. Instead of driving out the invaders, ordinary black Africans also prefer to surrender or submit. In the process, foreigners have been depriving black Africans of their natural resources, their lands, and even their rights to live on their own land in their own countries. Not only has the whole African continent today become the property of the Europeans imperialists thanks to conspiracy of the African so-called leaders with Europeans, but it also has become a new ground for other foreign entities such as the Chinese, Indians, and Lebanese to practice openly modern slavery. Any intelligent black person can clearly see that the so-called leaders in Africa and Caribbean countries undermine their own nations, and they also have disdain for their own people. The so-called African leaders are today the overseers of slave plantations African countries have become thanks to the European imperialists and other foreigners. Contrary to this so-called chief of Ugandan Defense Forces, no intelligent and respectful official in any sovereign country would dare make such unintelligent and unintelligible statement publicly. It is high time black African rose up and demolished the family dictatorships or the worthless African so-called leaders who have sold them out to foreigners, deprived them of the resources, and made them the laughingstock of the whole world. The backward mentality among black Africans and the wickedness of some black Africans towards their fellow black Africans have made it easy for foreigners to loot Africa's immense natural resources and to dehumanize black Africans in the process. Enough is enough. Until black Africans get rid of their worthless so-called leaders, nothing good politically, economically, socially, and technologically will happen in Africa. Black Africans today will have nobody to blame but themselves if they don't do anything that guarantees the economic freedom and the well-being of the future generation of black Africans. Please, like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I will be back soon with more news.
I want you to take a moment and really let this sink in, because the images coming out of the occupied territories right now are something that history will mark as a turning point. For decades, we have watched a narrative unfold. A narrative of invincibility, of an untouchable military machine backed by the full financial and military might of the United States. But today, that narrative lies shattered on the ground, buried under the rubble of Haifa's refineries and the smoldering wreckage of what used to be a petrochemical plant in Beersheba. We are witnessing something unprecedented, a mass exodus.
Amid rising tensions in the region, new claims suggest that Israelis are attempting to flee the country in large numbers, driven by fears of ongoing missile attacks.
The ambassador, in fact, has warned Americans very limited options to leave Israel. Best exit option is currently via Israel tourism shuttles to Taba in Egypt.
Thousands of Israelis are lining up at embassies across Europe. From Portugal to Poland and Germany, demand for passports is surging.
Not of Palestinians, not this time, but of the settlers themselves. They are running. They are fleeing in droves, not towards the so-called Promised Land, but away from it. They are rushing to the Taba border, crossing with Egypt, desperate to escape the long-promised and now terrifyingly realized wrath of Iran's military response. This is the moment where the chickens have come home to roost for a government led by a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu, whose entire political career has been built on the fantasy that you can steal land, assassinate scientists, and bomb sovereign nations with impunity. The reality is that the safe haven they thought they built has become a kill box, and the people who cheered for the genocide in Gaza are now packing their bags, abandoning the colonial project they so fiercely supported, all while Netanyahu stands on a podium begging them to stay calm. This is not a trickle, this is a flood. Reports are pouring in from the Taba crossing, which has become a 24-hour hub of frantic, chaotic activity. Thousands of Israelis, including entire families with young children and foreign students who thought they were safe, are paying inflated fees. Egypt has jacked up the crossing price from $25 to a staggering $60 per person, a blatant exploitation of their fear, just to get their feet onto Egyptian soil in the Sinai Peninsula. Why? Because Ben Gurion Airport has become a target. It's no longer the secure gateway it once was. Iranian missiles have turned it into a zone of uncertainty, with flight schedules thrown into constant disarray. So, these settlers are taking buses from Al-Quds, winding their way down to Sinai, and then scrambling to catch flights out of Sharm el-Sheikh, desperate to reach Europe or the United States. It's a modern-day reversal of the biblical Exodus, except this time, they are running from the wrath of the very people they have been displacing and terrorizing for 3/4 of a century. They are leaving behind a land they stole now that the bill has come due. And as they flee, they are finding that the world is not exactly welcoming them with open arms, especially in Greece, where the people have remembered the betrayal of their own history and are standing firm against becoming the next dumping ground for Zionist colonialism. Now, let's get into the chaos that is unfolding. So, where exactly are these people going, and why are they being treated like pariahs in places that once welcomed Western money? The route is specific. They cross into Sinai, head to the airports, and then scatter. Many are heading to European capitals like Berlin, Paris, and London, hoping to ride out the storm in comfort. But a significant number are looking to Greece, and this is where the story takes a deeply ironic and satisfying turn. Greek citizens from the islands to the mainland are refusing to offer accommodation to these colonial settlers. In a stunning display of historical memory and solidarity, local communities are actively preventing the sale of land and properties to these fleeing Israelis. They have watched what happened in Palestine. They know the playbook. The settlers buy land, they establish a presence, and then they slowly, methodically take over. The Greeks are looking at the decades of ethnic cleansing in Haifa and Jaffa, and they are saying, not on our soil, not again. They are terrified of becoming the next site of a Zionist colony, and they are using every legal and social means to block the influx. It is a beautiful, defiant act of resistance. These settlers, who spent years voting for a man who boasts about bombing his neighbors back to the Stone Age, who supported the wholesale slaughter in Gaza, are now finding that the world sees them for what they are: colonial parasites. They are being criticized from every corner for their sheer hypocrisy, supporting endless war with their votes and their tax dollars, and then being the first to jump ship when the consequences come knocking on their own reinforced doors. Now, let's talk about why they are running. Because what is happening inside the occupied territories right now is nothing short of an Armageddon hidden in plain sight. The Israeli military censorship is working overtime, desperately trying to scrub the internet of the devastation, but the truth is leaking out through the cracks on X, on Telegram, through the brave journalists who refuse to be silenced. In the past 24 hours, Iran's military has shifted its strategy in a way that has fundamentally broken the back of the much-hyped layered missile defense system. We are no longer talking about the old tactics. This is a new war. Iran is now deploying dangerously maneuverable missiles. We're talking about the Fatah 2 hypersonic class that fly at speeds exceeding Mach 5 and perform unpredictable evasive maneuvers in their terminal phase. The Israeli Arrow, David's Sling, and even the US-made THAAD batteries that were rushed into the country are being rendered useless. The math is simple. You cannot intercept what you cannot predict. Each missile strike is now recording multiple hits. The air defense systems are firing, missing, and then the warhead impacts with a fury that is leveling entire city blocks. The refineries in Haifa were taken out of service after a major strike, sending a massive plume of black smoke into the sky that can be seen from Lebanon. Beersheba was struck brutally. The major petrochemical plant there was blown to pieces, razed to the ground, leaving a crater where critical infrastructure used to stand. But it doesn't stop there. Just this morning, the news broke of a catastrophic strike on Petah Tikva. Reports from Israeli emergency services, the Magen David Adam, confirmed that at least 6 people were wounded, but sources on the ground in Israel, cross-referenced with X posts that are popping up and then being deleted by the censors, suggest the damage is far more extensive. We are seeing videos of entire residential buildings in Petah Tikva gutted by fire. Tel Aviv itself is not the bustling hub it was 2 weeks ago. It is a city under siege. The Iranian barrages last night and this morning targeted multiple locations, including the Gush Dan area, Bnei Brak, and specific military installations that the Zionists thought were secret. The silence from the Israeli military command is deafening. They have imposed a total blackout, forbidding journalists from even filming the exact impact sites. They don't want the world to see the scale of the destruction because it reveals the abject failure of their defenses. After the joint U.S.-Israeli jets hit Isfahan, an act of sheer aggression that was meant to intimidate, Iran unleashed one of the biggest furies since this war began. We are talking about the Mojtaba wave strikes, barrages so intense that 3 major cities were reportedly burning for hours. The military objectives were met with surgical precision. The psychological toll is unimaginable. Shelters are running out of space. People are sleeping in stairwells and basements, terrified of the next siren that may or may not sound. Casualties are mounting not just from the impacts themselves, but from the stampedes, the heart attacks, the sheer panic. This is the reality of smart attacks. Iran's military has learned. They have watched for months, cataloging the positions of the Iron Dome batteries, the launch sites, the command and control centers. They have outsmarted the air defenses, and now every strike records massive hits. We need to be brutally clear about what is happening. The settlers are not just leaving because of the missiles. They are leaving because they have lost faith in the state they built. Benjamin Netanyahu, the war criminal who has spent his life telling them that they are safe as long as they are strong, is now begging them to stay calm. He is begging them to trust him. But why should they? He led them into a war of attrition against Iran, a nation of 85 million people with a sophisticated military-industrial complex, all while expecting that the U.S. would simply bomb anyone who dared to retaliate. The Americans are doing their best, but even the Golden Dome is a fantasy when facing hypersonic glide vehicles that can turn on a dime. So, the settlers are making a rational choice. They are leaving. They are abandoning the stolen land, leaving behind the rubble of Haifa and the fires of Beersheba. They are running from the very consequences of the violence they chained. And as we look to the future, the question becomes, where do they go? They are finding closed doors in Greece. They are finding hostility in Europe, and they are finding that the narrative of the brave Israeli defending his homeland is a farce. They are colonial squatters who have finally been evicted by the price of their own violence. The war is now in its 2nd month, and with every passing day, the escalations grow. This is not just a war, it is a reckoning. We will continue to follow the flight of these settlers, the destruction of their military bases, and the crumbling of a colonial project that has haunted the Middle East for too long.